Right, we are live. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for coming to this week's. I'm still not sure exactly what I'm calling these e-learning career chats, e-learning designers academy live. I don't know. It's kind of a work in progress, but thank you so much for coming. For those of you who have never attended one of these sessions before, as you've probably, if you have attended, you've heard me say this before, but if this is your first time, these conversations are completely designed to be casual and unplanned. So Megan and I, we've talked for like 5 minutes before we did this session. And so we don't have slides. We don't have any pre-planned questions. It's kind of go with the flow. But with that being said, as we talk about building a business in L&D, one of the things I want to encourage everybody to do is to submit your questions for Megan or myself. And you can do that. There's a questions tab to the right of the chat tab, and you can submit and upvote on questions there. And about halfway through, we will start tackling those. So enjoy the session, everybody. And hi, Megan, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much. So I'm really happy to have this conversation with you today because, we've collaborated on a few things in the past with ATD, and I know you've done a lot of work with Diane Elkins, Artists in eLearning, who I used to work with. And so I've always had this, felt this connection, even if it was like 10 feet apart, arm length distance connection to you. And I've always loved the work that you've done with XAPI and your project management model, Llama. But one thing that I don't think a lot of people have heard is, your journey into building Torrance Learning, your company, and kind of the story behind that. So I'm really excited to talk about that because I always think that's kind of about the behind the scenes stuff that a lot of people want to hear about. But before we talk about that, tell everybody a little bit about what you currently do, what your company does, and all of that good stuff.
Sure thing. So Torrance Learning is almost full stack provider for learning and development, mostly corporate or large scale nonprofit in the workplace learning space. So we don't do a lot of higher ed, we don't do a lot of K-12, although we love our projects that we do in those spaces. So we provide learning strategy, learning design, learning development, and custom software development and platform deployment in order to support all of that. So we get to see a lot of different things in that space. We also have, and most of that work is custom. Most of our work is custom. So done one time on a project basis for a particular client. We also have an off-the-shelf generic curriculum. Actually, it's more than a generic, but it is an off-the-shelf curriculum that we offer, and it's called eLeventure. So it's eLeventure by Torrance Learning. So it's branded slightly differently, and that we sell through Open Sesame, through Cornerstone's content network, through Udemy for Business, and a couple of and Mastery Tech, right? So and then a few smaller ones. We also have a number of professional development offerings that we do for the industry, right? So we call it our ways of working, where we take the same methods and approaches that we use. So you mentioned Llama, right? The Agile Project Management for Instructional Design, but we also offer other courses on XAPI, on evaluation strategies, on instructional design to the industry. So it's basically the same curriculum we put our own team through.
It's super cool, and it's super impressive. I didn't know about like half of that. I didn't know you had off the shelf courses that organizations can use. So I'm curious. So my first question I want to ask you, I imagine, where you're at today with your business, that's probably not how you started. And it's probably where you're at today. You probably couldn't have envisioned that how many ever years ago when you started your business. And so correct me if I'm wrong. I went and looked at your LinkedIn profile, and you've been working for yourself in some capacity, managing your own business. Am I correct? Since 1998?
Yeah.
Is that right?
You did your homework, my friend.
I did. That's a long time.
Yes.
And so I'm curious to know, take us all the way back to 1998, and how did you start? How did you become a freelancer? Tell us that story. I'm curious to know.
So have you read Cami Bean's book, The Accidental
Oh
Instructional
yeah,
Beginner?
she's
Okay,
on.
so
She's on this next week.
oh, fantastic. I love Cami.
Yeah.
Um, so from it, you could call me an accidental business owner, right? I'll even take you back before 1998.
Yeah.
We have a whole hour, right?
Sure.
Just kidding. So in my undergraduate degrees in communication, I have a master's in business. Right?
Okay.
I am very well trained to be a mid-level manager in a large multinational organization.
Sure.
The whole entrepreneur and I went to Cornell University, and they're really, really big on entrepreneurial and venture and all this stuff. And I thought, that's for the crazy people. Like, that's not for me, that stuff. So I didn't take any of those classes.
Yeah.
And my life plan in my early 20s, right? We all know how accurate those life plans tend to be, was to be that mid-level manager in a large organization, managing innovation and people, and building that thriving environment for that, where the goal was my husband would be the entrepreneurial one. He'd be raising the kids. He'd give the flexible lifestyle. I'd be income and benefits.
Sure.
So I was working for what was then called Anderson Consulting. It's now called Accenture. And the lore of those days is that when you left, you doubled your salary. Right? So the longer you stay, the higher your salary goes, the bigger your double is.
Yeah.
Right? So it's kind of like gambling, right? Right? So I had done a number of projects, and I love this. Everybody's asking questions. This is fantastic.
I know, it's great questions.
I had been doing some very, very successful projects internally for Anderson Consulting. My manager had left, was then doing consulting to Arthur Anderson. It's the other half of the house. He said, "Hey, Megan, I'd love for you to join us and do what you've just done for Anderson Consulting over here at Arthur Anderson." Okay. And I did some very fast math and doubled it and said, "That's my hourly rate." And he said, "Yes, okay," which means I did not go high enough.
Yeah, right.
But so that was 1988. So I jumped ship. I was
1998, right?
1998.
Okay,
Yep.
I thought I heard you say 88.
Oh,
sorry.
Yeah, no. So 98. So that's that, right? I was then a 1099. I spent about 5 years bouncing around a very small network of people who were all doing similar work. And literally it was when you're done with Megan, will you give me a call? Because I've got a project for her.
Okay.
This is pretty awesome,
yeah,
right?
It's a great problem to have.
It's a fabulous problem to have. It meant I learned, right, taxes, and I learned that in 1988, prior to the Affordable Care Act, it's really hard as a woman of childbearing age with pre-existing conditions to get anything like remotely close to affordable health insurance. Yeah. Disability insurance, forget it, right? So I left all my big company benefits, and my husband at the time, he left and started following what was the plan, which was his entrepreneurial dream. So I was trying to figure out how to recreate the bacon and the benefits that I was getting in a large organization. Did you know that when you're a freelancer, you can take all the vacation time you want, but nobody pays you for it?
I know.
Right?
It's not any easier to take time off as you think. You might think it is, but it's not.
It is not. No, yeah. Right? And so everybody would say, "Oh, you're kind of like living the dream." And I'm thinking, no, I just changed one set of stresses for an entirely different set of stresses.
Yeah.
Right. But I did that for a few years. I never also had to learn sales.
Okay.
Right? And so if you think about what makes a business, there are people, there is a thing that you deliver. But if you aren't selling that somehow, there's the people in the product don't matter, right? You can't do people in product. So because you cannot pay the bills with eyeballs and clicks.
Right.
So I never had to learn that. I got really lucky. Right? So things were up and down and bumpy, but living the dream, having a good time. This is a super long answer to your question.
That's fine. No, keep going.
Oh, by the way, maternity leave. Yeah, you can take all the maternity leave you want. So I had my daughter. I was trying to figure out, right, do I find childcare and then a job, or a job and then childcare? All of a sudden, my inability to sell was coming home to roost. I now had a husband and a baby and no income. So I got a call from one of my former clients, and who said, hey, we're trying to put in this thing called a learning management system. This is 2002. We're trying to put in a thing called a learning management system with this stuff called SCORM. I looked that up really quickly, as quickly as you could then, right? And I got a contract implementing their first learning management system. It was a software company's first learning management system. It was my first learning management system, but I'd actually been trained in instructional design early in my career.
Sure.
Never used it. So I then worked for the LMS company for a few years, solo contractor.
Yeah.
One of those clients one day said, hey, can you build the stuff that goes in my LMS? Like, yeah, that's the easy part. It's not, but right. So I said, yeah, I could do this, right? And that then was about 2006.
Okay.
That started to grow. By 2007, I'd hired my first person. By 2008, I hired 2 more. So it was no longer cool to be in the second bedroom of my house.
It was 9 years into your organization, your company,
Yep.
until you hired somebody, and that's interesting. Okay.
Yes. So I love working with teams. I actually have a concentration in my undergraduate degree was on interpersonal and team dynamics. Actually, now at eCornell teach team dynamics, right? Or facilitate team dynamics courses, right? But I worked solo because it was terrifying to be responsible to put food on somebody else's table.
Absolutely, yeah.
So yeah,
okay.
So that's the early days of how I fell backwards into it.
So fast forward 10 plus a couple years later, how big's your team now?
We just let 3 of our summer interns go back to school. Oh, sorry, 2. We hired one on. So we are at 27 right now.
Wow, that's so cool. That's a really great story. I think that as I was listening to that, the question I always get asked as a freelancer from people who want to start their own business or start freelancing, the number one question is, how do you find your clients? And the thing that you described in your story is the same thing that I felt and I still feel. I've been freelancing on and off since 2013, and then I started freelancing full time in 2019. But the conclusion I've come to is I don't know how I find my clients. They kind of just find me and they fall into my lap. And then I've learned, the answer I now give is I go, well, I do things to help clients find me. Like I put myself out there, I blog, I go speak at conferences, but that's very similar. It feels similar to what you described early in your career. Is it just happened to be, I don't want to say happenstance, but a network of people that you kind of just bounced and ping ponged as you built your business and grew, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so it was interesting, right? So I did that before there was social media.
Yeah.
Right. AOL was still a thing then. Not that I'm dating myself. I'm dating myself. Right? So I think to put yourself in the spaces where people find you, which, right? I was just thinking about you before we went live, right?
Yeah.
Takes a lot of time.
It takes a lot of time.
It takes a lot of time to be consistent with it and everything. It is hard work. So I recommend, right? And what I started doing was asking whenever somebody would contact me and I didn't know them in advance, I'd be like, how did you find out about me?
Yep.
Right. So I was finding out I could make a tree of how every single client found us.
Well, that has to be so interesting because before, not that the internet didn't exist, but it probably wasn't common that your organization had a website or a portfolio back when you started. And so, yeah, you literally could do the association of who called who to talk to who to end up like how they found you. Most of my clients, I had 2 calls this week with 2 potential clients, and it's always it comes up during that first conversation. And now, it's always like, well, I Googled you. And that always makes me feel good because I'm like, oh, well, that means I'm doing my job on the internet. When did you, I guess, bouncing off of that, when did you decide or discover or realize that you needed a website for your company? Like, how did that come about? And when did that come about? Or when did you, and maybe I'll add to that question, when did you realize that you couldn't depend on just bouncing around from referrals and clients and you had to start selling and marketing yourself? If that helps answer that question too, I'm curious.
Yeah, no, it totally does. And I actually had a website from the start.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah, I had a website from the start. I struggled with branding. My first company name was called doyourbestwork.com.
Oh, wow.
And I got referred to as the lady who does her best work. Like,
yeah.
It's not quite what I wanted. So branding was tricky because I'm not a brand person.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we had a website early on, and what was interesting was the number of people who did Google us, find us on the web, and express how much they appreciated having so the people who, this is really interesting, right? The people who Googled us were local companies who were happy to have a local provider at the time. Because of because I'm leveraging that Arthur Andersen alumni network.
Yeah.
My clients were in Minnesota, Northern Michigan, like they which is a Michigan one, but nobody else was in Michigan. All the rest of the subject matter experts and everywhere around, Atlanta, and Sarasota, Florida, right? So my clients are all over, from my personal network, but my local clients were so happy to have a local connection, but they found me on Google, which was this interesting part.
And that makes sense too, because, back then we didn't have Zoom or hop on a Zoom call or hop on a video call to share your screen, right? I mean, how did you back then, if you worked with a remote client, how did you even send them the, I guess I was going to say storyline file, like as if storyline existed back then, but you know what I mean? Like that collaboration, that remote collaboration was probably that much harder, given the lack of technology, right?
We spent a lot of time on, emailing big files.
Yeah.
We very early. So, Phil Simon wrote a book. Actually, we were featured in it, called, what was it? But basically on small companies leveraging technology to be big. So, and so we very quickly, right? Almost immediately we got on QuickBooks, so we had like official accounting. We had at the time, it was You Send It, but it's not called Hightail, right? So we had one of the early file sending services.
Sure.
We were early users of Review My eLearning, and other tools to be able to be present. We lived on the phone with them. Actually, we had a great workflow with our remote clients, even though we were all in one office.
Yeah.
So we weren't dispersed like Artisan or a lot of them where, there's contractors, everybody. Our model has really been primarily focused on W-2 team member employees who will come together and work collaboratively until the pandemic happened.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking about this the other day. Can you imagine, this is kind of off topic, but it made me realize that as awful as a pandemic has been, we're kind of fortunate that it happened at this time with this kind of technology. If you were to go back 15, 20 years ago, before there were real systems to allow for remote work or remote, all the things that we take for granted nowadays, this probably would have been a way worse situation, not just economically, but, for the whole society with out Zoom and all the things that we take for granted now, and high-speed internet, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, in about 2009, I remember declaring that video was just absolutely a non-starter for our industry because bandwidth was too big. It was equipment was too expensive, production was too expensive, and I love eating those words.
Good for you. That's hilarious. I remember once I went to a conference session when Apple Watches first came out, and I went to this session and they were talking about how the future of e-learning was going to be, everyone's going to take their little compliance courses on their Apple Watch. And I still remember rolling my eyes when I saw that session title. I'm like, there's no way. I'm very happy that I was right about that. So,
Oh, we got Google Glass very early on. We were,
yeah.
So yeah, we played with that too.
Yeah, for sure. Well, good. Well, if you were to go back in time, to where you were at in your business and mentally back in, like, let's say 1998 or the early 2000s, what advice would you have given yourself? Like, what would you say to yourself now?
Oh boy. Get a good therapist.
Yeah.
Save money.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because it's great when you're making it, right? And I didn't really plan for the gaps when we weren't making it, right?
Yeah.
And pay your taxes. I didn't run into that problem, but that was like one of my big things. So my work at Andersen and Arthur Andersen had been on payroll accounting.
Yeah.
So that actually, if accounting is not your thing, find an accountant.
Sure.
That's super helpful. Or a bookkeeper or somebody, right? Sales, learn sales.
Mm-hmm.
That's huge. And I think those would be the big things. Sales, accounting, save your money. Have a plan B.
Have a plan B. Yeah. Yeah, I can agree with all of that. I remember my first freelancing gig. It was a part-time gig. I was still working full time, but nobody teaches you that you have to pay your own self-employment tax. You know what I mean? Like, your TurboTax may tell you that, but you didn't know. And so I wasn't sure what I was supposed to do or pay estimated taxes, and I got a really big tax bill at the end of that year, and that was really rough. So paying your taxes is super important, because you don't want to have to. The longer you wait to write that check, the harder it is to write that check to the IRS. That's no fun.
Yeah, and it's a dramatic and scary one. Like, so yeah, pay your taxes.
I'm curious to know, have you experienced this? One of the things that was a big epiphany, a big realization for me as a freelancer running my own business, I still don't feel like our society, and when I say our society, I'm talking about like the banking system, even the way government treats small businesses and small solo entrepreneurs, even though we're a very capitalist society and the country claims to be all about small businesses. I have never felt that the way you go set up an LLC or an S Corp, or whether you're a sole proprietor, or the way you do your taxes, like, none of it's optimized for or makes it easy for a small business. And this first hit me in the face when I started freelancing full time, and we had to go refinance. We didn't have to, but we chose to go refinance our house. And I remember telling the bank, our broker, that I run my own business. I'm self-employed. And his reaction to me was like, "Oh, well, then we probably shouldn't include you on the financing." Because in their mind, a young 30 person running their own business means, oh, you're an Uber driver and you don't, or you do DoorDash and you don't make a lot of money. And I think there's a lot of, I don't want to say bias against small business owners, but I just don't think the system is really optimized for the fact that, no, actually, small business owners do make good money. Solo entrepreneurs and freelancers do make good money. And sometimes, in my case, I'm the breadwinner, I don't know. Have you experienced that? I'm curious to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so it's definitely it's tricky, especially in the early days, right, where you don't have multiple years of tax returns to be able to say, no, I'm doing this, right?
Yep.
So that's tricky. I often think of people who have been successful in that start period, had a spouse who had a full-time W-2 job.
Yeah, sure.
Right, which is not right. It's not always possible.
Nope.
And so that's a bit tricky. I think that there's a lot of things, right? There's a lot of things that aren't obvious. There are a lot of things that are tricky, right? So my accountant was the one who, so I could do an LLC, a subchapter S, right? It could be an S Corp or a C Corp or all these other things. And I thought, I don't even understand what the differences between these are. right?
Yeah.
And so, and they're big decisions, right? And when is your fiscal year? And are you going to pay taxes on an accounting or on an accrual basis or a cash basis? Because you can't switch back and forth based on whatever's most advantageous to you. And all these decisions that having that trusted advisor to help you is awesome.
Yeah.
I will say there are surprising supports for small businesses that I always used to say, like, what's the catch? Right?
Mm-hmm.
So your local chamber of commerce
Mm-hmm.
has they have supports for big business, they have supports for small business, and they have people who know how to navigate these things.
Sure.
The Small Business Administration offers, right, there's a federal US, and this is US centric, right, but a US website, but then in each state there are small business development organizations that help people start up businesses
Mm-hmm.
and figure out all the things. And at a freelancer, they don't provide as much support, but as soon as
Yeah.
you start getting 2 or 3 people in your company, then they can hook you. No kidding, Tim. Free financial consulting, free
Really?
marketing consulting, free talking me through what it takes to get a loan from a bank. The
Wow.
other thing, set up a business banking account,
Yeah.
right? Right. Keep your money separate. Keep your money
Yep.
separate. Keep your money separate. Keep your money separate. Keep your money separate.
Mm-hmm.
When your separate money is in a bank, have that be a business checking account. Have a
Yep.
business card through that. And I am a huge fan of small local banks.
Mm-hmm.
The super tiny local banks don't have all of the things that you might want or need, especially if you need to get international wire transfers.
Mm-hmm.
But your medium-sized local banks have people who will walk you through stuff. And so I'm actually a really big fan. And when they see you as a business customer, they treat you like a business customer, and you can make asks of them, and they do
Sure.
loan you money.
Wow. That's interesting. Yeah. When I decided to freelance full time, all the stuff like setting up a business checking account and establishing myself as an LLC, there was a lot of Googling and LegalZoom and figuring that out. It's a lot of work, but it's so worth it. I mean, even though, like you were talking about earlier, the challenges with getting healthcare or health insurance, or you don't get paid when you take vacation time or maternity leave. But I don't know about you. I don't think I could ever go back to a corporate environment. And I don't, obviously you're running a team with dozens of people. I don't imagine you would ever go back to a corporate job if you didn't want to.
I've been told I'm unemployable at this point.
Really? Yeah. I'm probably unemployable as well. Yeah. But I think you get to a point, I don't know if this is true for you, but this has been true for me. I did the corporate thing. I moved up to being a director. I managed a team of 20 people, and that was really rewarding and great. But, you learn really quickly what you like and what you don't like. And I think I'm one of those people that I know too well what I don't like and what I don't want to put up with. And I'm probably unemployable as a result of it, but I'm gladly unemployable. So, good. Okay. So I think I had one final question before we tackle people's questions that they've submitted, but I think it just escaped me for a moment. So the last question I have for you on this is, I did a post on this on LinkedIn a couple weeks ago, and I think a lot of times people get this messaging that you should just quit your job and become a freelancer. Like, you can just do that. And I find that so when people say just quit your job and become a freelancer, that's so lacks perspective on the fact that life's complicated, and most people can't just quit their job and become a freelancer. And so what advice would you give to those people who their lives are complicated, right? Maybe they have student loan debt. Maybe they have kids. Maybe they're the breadwinner. Maybe they need their health insurance, but they want to start their business or start freelancing. What's your advice to them for those people?
I feel like one thing is to be really straight up with your family, right? The people who depend on you. It's not Shark Tank. You're not pitching them. They need to be along for the ride. and that's important, right? So, for example, right, I was making lots of money at one point as a freelancer, and then as we grew, I needed to pay other people and pay more to the accountant and get
Yep.
space. And all of a sudden, I am making a lot less money, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which becomes a family conversation, right? And
Yep.
so that's important. Um, I I think there are a lot of things that you can dabble in. Um, I have felt like, so for example, if somebody's a freelancer and every once in a while we do bring on people on a contract basis just for spot projects.
Yep.
It's not our main gig. Our main gig is bringing in team members and growing their careers and supporting them as we go. But
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we need spots, and that works. But if they're doing that in addition to a full-time job, I know I get second. I know I get second time.
Oh,
I know I get
sure.
hired time. I get time after work when the rest of our team isn't working. So it's got to be the right situation,
Yep.
and the right vibe.
Yep.
I also had a mentor who one year shared with me, and I've shared this with so many people. She and her husband every year, I can't remember if it's New Year's Eve or New Year's Day, I need to ask her, but Kathy was saying they make a timeline of their life. Right? From here to when they think they might die. And of course, nobody ever knows, right? And we always have this YOLO and do it now because you'll never know. But this exercise in which you say, right, how old are my kids? When might I be putting kids through college? When will my home be paid off? When will my student loans be paid off? When do I want to retire? Those kinds of things. And it often helps put into perspective that as much as we say you only live once and do it today and blah, 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 you actually can't do all of the things today, but you do have some time to plan out and prioritize. And it's some really good perspective, and it's completely counter to what all the social media will tell you to do with your life.
I totally agree with that. I think the thing I always tell people, it took me 10 years to build up the savings and the confidence and the wherewithal to quit my full-time job. And I probably could have done it years ago and been as successful as I've been now. And that's great. But, I had debt to pay, and I needed to know what I was really, really good at and what I wanted to offer. And I think it's okay to say this is going to take time. This is not something, and because here's the thing, choosing to quit a full-time job and start your own business and freelance, it's not like just going and getting a different job at a different company. That's a life-changing thing. I mean, that changes fundamentally how you make money and how you navigate life. And so it's a big decision. And I don't recommend anybody make it lightly. It's and you're right. Having perspective on your life is important when making such a big decision.
Yeah. Actually, we have, I know there are a lot of people who transition from teaching into instructional design.
Yeah.
We have a teacher who comes and we call her our adjunct. She spends every summer with us. So she finishes the school year. Oh, wow. She starts working with us. We plan, right, for our resource planning. We plan to have Dawn in those 3 months period.
That's awesome.
And Friday was her last day. This week, she's back at high school prepping.
Yeah. That's great experience for her, though.
It's fantastic.
So, yeah. Good. All right. Well, we have some questions in the questions pod from folks who've been attending. So let's tackle those. I'll go ahead and facilitate this. So our first question, who has the most upvotes, is from Vicky. Hey, Vicky. And Vicky wants to know, for freelancers and contractors, how do you negotiate hardware and software? Are contractors paying for their own software licenses, or is it provided by the company? I'll let you tackle. I mean, I have an answer on this. I think we'll probably say the same thing, Megan, but you go ahead first.
So I am not a tax attorney, nor am I an IRS consultant. However, there are rules that make you a contractor or an employee. You are there's 20 of them, right? 20 questions you can ask. And Vicky, I recommend you ask that, check that out. But here's the gist of it. As a contractor, you are a business. You are expected to provide software licenses and hardware for the work that you do. You are expected to be in charge of your own taxes, your own things, your own professional development, all of that. And part of that is hardware and software. Now, if the organization you're subbing to, so if you're subbing to a vendor or to a company, right, or you're doing direct to a company, they may have specialized software that they, or hardware that they then provide to you, but it has to be, you can't say, yeah, can you get me a laptop and a license of Captivate? Because the expectation is that you have it and that you have an up-to-date version.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so, it seems like a burden that you have to provide it all, but at the end of the day, those are investments that you make in your business and they become tax deductible. And so, Storyline, if I weren't freelancing full time, I'd be like, yeah, I don't know if $1,200 a year, however much it is, that's a lot of money to spend, but that's $1,200 a year that I get to deduct on my taxes.
I'm wondering, did we just lose Tim? Because I think we just lost Tim. Okay, all right, so here's what we're gonna do. If you all can hear me, thank you for answering the questions. I'm gonna start doing the questions and I'm assuming Tim will show up, but I'm scrolling along here. How do I decide? Okay, so Jason's question is similar, right? How do you decide on tech, or do you rely on the customer to provide infrastructure? When it is, so say I have a customer and they say, I'd like to build an e-learning course, or I want to build a chatbot or whatever, right? Question number one for me is, do you have a preference for what software we use for this, right? And if they have a preference for software, then I use their software. Now, if they say, we use Lectora, and I say, I don't have, we've got you, that's okay, we just kept going.
Okay, I don't know what happened. My computer just shut down, so I'm on my phone.
Well, hi, we're answering Jason's question that got 3 votes on how do you decide on tech.
Okay, continue.
So, and fortunately, by the way, shout out to Webinar Ninja. It didn't drop me, and I asked everybody, am I still here? And they answered in the question. So,
awesome.
The community's got your back, Tim. This is awesome.
Okay, continue.
So, if the client needs a piece of software that I don't know how to use, right, and I don't have, then we can start having conversations, right? Maybe this isn't a good project for me, right? Most clients don't want you to learn your own industry software on their dime. So if somebody said, hey, Megan, can you do a Lectora project? I don't have people who can do, right? We don't do Lectora. Yes, I could buy it. Yes, I could learn, but my client doesn't want me to learn on their time. So, so I'm going to say, you know what, I'm going to refer you to somebody else who does that, right? Or, right, in the early days of Domino or Domino Flow, I said, this is something that I want to invest in. So we invested in the software, we invested in the time to train our team, and we did that. If it's something that is really, really unique, then we just have a conversation about it. I don't know, Tim, what does that kind of follow along with your experience?
Can you recap what was the question? It was how do you decide on tech?
How do you decide on, oh, that's right, you can't even see the questions. Oh, this is my show now, Tim.
I can't see the questions. I just wanted to make sure you were which one you were answering.
Jason's question, how do you decide on tech, or do you rely on the customer to provide the infrastructure?
Oh, I guess it depends on the client you're working with. For me, most of the clients I work with, they know, and I guess what we're defining as tech, I guess it depends, but they usually have a learning management system. They know that they need a course in Storyline that's SCORM compliant. And that's great for me. That's the kind of client I'm looking for. Other organizations, maybe Megan's with Torrance Learning, or other organizations are more, like you said, full stack, where you're providing full consultative services to organizations that don't even have an infrastructure for technology. They need consultation on LMS and what authoring tools to use. So I guess that depends. For me, most of the clients I work with, they kind of have an understanding of what they want, and I'm just fulfilling that need. But I missed half of the question, half of your answer, so I don't know if that aligns at all with what you were saying back in.
But well, actually, no, actually, you segued. You've been here in spirit the whole time.
Good. Okay.
I think the other piece of the infrastructure, right? So there's the authoring tool, there's the LMS. Most clients are going to have an LMS. We offer one, and we're an LMS reseller, or we help them select if they don't have one. The other then gets to your project infrastructure, right? How are you managing files? How are you sharing files with your client, right? So the way my business works, we go to the client. Whatever the client, if the client has which means, yes, we have Hightail accounts, Dropbox accounts, Box accounts, right? Google Drive accounts, we have Teams, we have all this, right? Yes, our laptops are a mess of everybody else's technology. We go to where the client is. But if the client says, I don't know, or what's easy for you, we have an answer for that too.
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
So we have our own infrastructure. We'll meet the client where they are.
Yeah, totally. I mean, for me, for my project management, I use Asana. I have a Dropbox account, but I have some clients where they want to work exclusively in Google Drive. And, part of being successful is flexing to those situations for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good. All right. I'm so happy I can do this on my phone. I'm actually quite amazed by this right now.
I'm super impressed with Webinar Ninja. Should we go to Sydney?
I'm kind of happy this happened so I could do this. All right. So our next question comes from Sydney. Hi, Sydney. And Sydney wants to know, how do you go about building a team? Broad question, but I'll add to this one. And Megan, I'd love to know your thoughts. The hardest part for me as a freelancer has been trying to determine when to outsource work. When does that make sense from a business standpoint? When is something not worth my time? When is it financially advantageous for me to do it? And I've done it for some low level stuff like generating closed captionings because I hate doing that work. But you've built a team, you hired full-time people. So I don't know if you have a thought on that. I know that's a broad question, but what's your experience, thoughts there?
It's a great question. So, and I'll kind of like pick up where you left off, Tim, right? So when I started out with an accountant. That was important. When I made my first hire, what I started doing, I called it, right, peeling out the onion, right?
Mm-hmm.
I hired the things that I could myself. I'm a control freak. Okay? Yeah. I hired out the things that I could do, right? So I felt comfortable giving up and that I could review. So the first thing I hired out was the actual development in, back then it was Adobe, or not, it was Articulate Presenter, right? Mm-hmm. And so I hired that. So I did the instructional design, right? And built storyboards and then handed it over. And then of course I'd be reviewing and then send it to client. And I thought, I'm never giving up the instructional design. Well, as things grew, I had to give up some instructional design. I'm like, but I'm never giving up running payroll. Well, and then I found out I could give up running payroll too. And so, and I'm as we go, and then it was like, I'm never giving up sales. Well, you know what? I've never got a sales team. So you start kind of figuring out what is it that you do that's your magic in your business, and you start letting those other pieces go, right? And yet, you know what? Actually, I was going to say, if push comes to shove, I haven't been in Storyline in so many years that I wouldn't be able to do it. But, right, when push comes to shove, I can run payroll. I can sell. Actually, I do a lot of selling. I can do instructional design. I can do almost all of, not all, but almost all of the jobs. So it's really there. Now, Sydney, over scale, right? We've identified what makes a great team member at Torrance Learning. And we have a recruiting process and a pipeline and an opportunity for people to grow and build their own portfolio as they participate in our pipeline. And it gives us an opportunity to meet people and get to know people better. And there are a few hallmarks which over the years, we've just found like, oh, this is someone whose values align, and yet they offer something unique and a different perspective and diversity that we don't have. And that we've been really, we have an amazing team right now because we've been able to hone that process.
Well, I think also, I mean, I think it's also important to remember that uh, you don't have to, running a business doesn't mean you have to build a team. I mean, for me, I think I've come to the conclusion because I'm like you, Megan, I'm a control freak. I don't feel like I'm very, I lack trust in people. This is me. I'm very well aware that these are opportunities. I lack trust in people delivering on the quality that I would deliver myself, even though I'm proven wrong and over time and time again that people can do that. But the thing that I ask myself is whenever I'm doing something that I know in my gut I should maybe be outsourcing or bringing somebody else to help me do is, and I learned this from Diane Elkins actually, and I think she learned it from it might have been you, Megan. I don't know, or they brought in somebody to help them on this. But the question is, are you working for your business or are you working in your business? And working in your business means you're doing the day-to-day stuff. You're doing the minutia of running your business on the inside. Working for your business is doing the strategic stuff to help your business grow and continue. And I'm somebody, I love working in my business. I love the creative stuff. But if I'm working so much in my business that's preventing me from moving forward or gaining more work or bettering my services or closing the next client, the sale, the next client, or whatever the case might be, then that's usually a sign that I need to outsource that. I don't know, Megan, is that something, does that resonate with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. I'll never forget. So one of the things I was loath to give up early on was voiceover. I was the voiceover. I
Really?
sold on the fact that, hey, I do 100% of your voiceover. I'm public speaking trained, right? You want to change slide number 57? Give me 10 minutes. We got new 57 audio. Totally no problem, right? We are on a dime. And then I spent the entire Memorial weekend one year recording audio for the client to say, you know, Megan, like a little bit more polish on that. And after the initial gut punch, I was like, oh, thank goodness. I can fire this out. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's funny. Well, good. Okay, cool. What time is it? We have, okay, we still have about 10 minutes. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go to Emmy's question. I hope I'm getting your name right, Emmy. Emmy wants to know or did you have to come up with an initial investment in tools to boost your business idea into reality, like licensing, authoring tools, video editing? I'll start this question off because I'll tell you what my experience was. How did I come up with the initial investment? For me, I'm gonna be honest, it was credit card debt. I put a lot of stuff on a credit card because when I was young and in my 20s, that's how I could do it. And not to say that's a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, obviously I don't like putting things on a credit card if I don't have to. Now I just do it for the points. But when you're investing in when you're investing in software or a computer, you know, like for example, the computer that just shut down on me because the battery died, I spent like $5,000 on because I needed that computer, but it was a strategic investment that I knew that's going to last me a long time. And so I think for me, those investments are making calculated risks, knowing that you're going to use it in some way. So I don't know, what's your take on that?
Absolutely. And I'm even going to level up the question about investment, right? So
yeah.
if we're doing freelance instructional design and e-learning, right? We are not, no venture capitalist, no angel investor is going to give you money. You are not, a services business is not going to be one that people throw money at, nor is a services business, when you want out, something you can sell for any kind of meaningful money, right? So we're in it for the love. And the lifestyle, right? And to grow a business and for all the reasons why everybody here is listening. That initial money that you need, right? You can buy it on credit cards. We used to only buy things that we needed just before we needed them, right? It's called bootstrapping. You get enough money to build, right? I never hired somebody until I had a project that would pay their salary for a year.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Whatever their salary. And so they were a part-time person, but that gave me Then while they were working on that first project, it gave me time to sell them into the second project, right? And so I was always working ahead. So it's always, for me, it's always been a matter of bootstrapping. It's not a business type that's going to attract investment. So save it up while you still have a regular job. That's probably the best advice, unless you need to get out and do that now and then choose a credit card. Yeah. Oh, actually, another bit of financial advice: choose a credit card with great benefits.
Mm-hmm. Yes. That paid for a big portion of my computer was the point.
Yeah.
Well, oh gosh, I lost my train of thought. What was I going to say? Oh, the thing I was going to say was, part of the reason, and this is just my story, everyone's story is different, but part of the reason it took me 10 years to quit my full-time job is I spent those 10 years saving up a year's worth of my pay so that I could do it. And that's, that's part of, sometimes the investment you're making is time.
Oh, good point. Good point. Yeah.
Yeah, we can quote that in the future. Write that down.
Yeah, right. Make that a t-shirt.
Yeah. All right, good. Thank you so much, Emmy. All right. So the next one comes from Rachel, and Rachel wants to know, if you had to guesstimate, what percentage of your company's client engagements are the bread and butter type, and what percentage are maybe flashier kinds of advisory work? So like, this is the way Rachel, maybe this is the way I hear this question. What is the everyday client versus like the not cornerstone like the company, but like your portfolio worthy work client, right? The big flashy one. For me, it varies depending on where I'm at financially, honestly. Like there's times where I'm just taking on bread and butter clients because you need to take on a bread and butter client. Mm-hmm. When things are good, then I get pickier about what clients I take on and what projects I want to take on, because at the end of the day, I want really great portfolio worthy work, but sometimes the business doesn't allow for that. So for me, the truth is I would probably say 30% is like the real high profile work that I would hope to be able to showcase in a portfolio. And then maybe 70% is the everyday work. I don't know. It varies. What's your thoughts on that, Megan?
Actually, it's hilarious because I was going to say probably 70% is regular, straight up e-learning, instructional design and development work, and the rest is advisory and other stuff that I'm doing. There's somebody at my door. I'm also the only person in my office, and so there's a delivery being made right now. Welcome to small business. So when you can't figure out why I'm not paying attention to them. Hold on. Yeah, talk amongst yourselves. Take the next question.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. It was a funny story. I was having a client call once. This was last year. I was having a client call, and we were on Zoom, and he had to get off the call because somebody was actively breaking into his house, like on the call. And I could hear him, like he didn't end the Zoom, and I sat there and heard him yelling and screaming at the person, and it was and he was in Ireland, so I couldn't I was like, I don't even know how could I help this person? And luckily they were okay. They scared him off, but so okay, good.
Yes, that was the marketing materials, right? So at some point you'll invest in marketing materials. Those are the print materials that are going to the ATD ICE conference next week.
Yeah. All right. Okay, I think we have time. Let's do, we have about 7 minutes and then we'll wrap up here. Let's do this question from Susan. Susan wants to know, and this is a really practical question. I think this one's important because it's hard to change your branding once you've established it. How do you go about picking a business name? That's hard. That's been hard for me because what you're really trying to do is you're trying to see into the future when you're picking a business name, in my opinion, and that's hard. So for me, my formal business name is something generic. I went with Tim Slade Omnimedia is my LLC name. Omnimedia meaning I do lots of different types of media. Who knows what it'll be in 10 years, but it'll be media. So that's Omnimedia. So yeah, Megan, what's your thoughts there?
Exactly the same thing. So my incorporated business name is Megan Torrance Inc. Megan Torrance Inc. can do anything. I can mow your lawn if you want. And then you file a DBA, a doing business as your brand name, right? From a business, this is such a great question, right? So Susan,
Yeah.
my first business was that do your best work. Not didn't tell anybody. I had great layers of meaning. Like if you're well trained, you have great communications, you can just focus on doing your best work. And that's how I wanted people to feel for their employees. And no, it's like a bad joke if you have to explain it. It
Yep.
doesn't make any sense. So then it was then it was Torrance Performance Solutions,
Okay.
and then which offered training, communication, and change management. Right? Anything people related that involved words and behavior change, we were going to do it. If you could pay us, we were all set. Then in Southeast Michigan, the word performance is often associated with engine performance for cars.
Oh.
So people were getting a little bit of brand confusion there. And then the movie The Office and the TPS reports.
No.
Torrance Performance Solutions and TPS reports, and it was like just too icky. So we then spent a lot of time trying to figure out what to call ourselves, right? So you need something unique that says that, right? We felt it was important to say what it was we did, but then also read into the future. And so very early on, when you join, right, in the trend of joining two words together, and right, the camel case, right,
Mm-hmm.
capitalizes, so we put it Torrance Learning. But if you look, there's an E on the end of Torrance right before the learning. And so early on, people are like, oh, we could emphasize that E, right? Torrance eLearning. And I had a flash of brilliance. I have no idea how I came up with this, but I said, eLearning is not it forever. Like, what if something else comes up? Because very shortly after mLearning, right?
Yeah.
Mobile, right? And learn conferences and stuff like that. So we kept it Torrance Learning, and we don't emphasize the E. But yeah, there's a ton of thinking about these things.
Yeah. It's a hard one. Yeah. I mean, if you're unsure, go with your name, and then you can, that you can change from in the future if you eventually want to brand yourself as a business. But it's, you're having to see into the future.
Pick your name carefully. My last name is also the name of a city in Southern California. So
there you go.
It does provide a little bit of confusion. So
yeah, well, if you Google Tim Slade and go to Google Images, there is a race car driver out of Australia. We happen to share the same birthday, oddly enough, and but there's one of the first pictures of him showing like these like abs, and so I always tell people, yeah, that's me. I have those abs, but yeah, so. Okay, well, before we wrap up here, a couple things I'm going to put in chat. So first thing, feel free to join us inside the eLearning Designers community. That link is in chat. It's a free community of anyone out there looking to grow their e-learning career and connect with other people in the e-learning industry. Our next e-learning career chat will be next Wednesday with Cami Bean, I believe. If she's not next Wednesday, it'll be the Wednesday after. But same time, same location next week. I won't have computer issues like I did today because I discovered my battery died and I didn't have it plugged in, so that was my fault. But you can check out the full schedule of our fall e-learning career chats. And then finally, check out the eLearning Designers Academy if you're interested in growing your e-learning career and learning storyline and building your portfolio. So as we wrap up, Megan, where can people connect with you, find you, reach out to you, all that good stuff?
Well, if you're going to be at ATD ICE next week, I will be there. I will be most findable in my booth in the expo. So it's a great big green booth, right? There's a brand, there's a lot of brand consistency here. And I've got a couple of talks there too, including for the at-home folks. So I'm doing a session on called Harnessing Change, which is leveraging agile methods for instructional design, and one on getting started with XAPI. We're starting up the XAPI learning cohort September 2nd. That's a free 12-week online learning experience. Hundreds of people we actually already have 400 people signed up for the fall, which is super exciting. And so that's at xapicohort.com. And I'm on LinkedIn and email and all sorts of great places. So I will be at DevLearn, I will be at Learning 2021, and on the interwebs in the meantime.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Megan. It was a great conversation, and I learned so much more about you and your than I knew before, and I love that. So
This was fun.
Thank you so much for coming. Enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you everybody for coming. Have a great rest of your week. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.